that our racial inequality has decreased. So in 1870, we started off with about a 25% income ratio for Black men relative to white men. And over time, that has increased to roughly 65%. So in other words, for every dollar earned by a white American, Black Americans earn 65 cents. And then you can see that that has been relatively flat for the last 20 years. So we kind of ended our discussion in September with this slide and thinking about, what are the causes of the flatlining for the last 20 years? And I think about today's discussion as hopefully helping us sort of answer that and think about what the policy changes and business changes might be that would help this start to grow again. COVID has revealed, I think, to many of us, what is always true, which is that Black workers are disadvantaged relative to white on any metric you can come up with, and that includes employment itself. So this is the unemployment rate for Black and white Americans stratified by their education level. And so overall, you can see that the Black unemployment rate is roughly double what it is for white Americans, and that's true in almost every education class. The higher education classes, the disparity is less, but it is still substantial. Some of you may be thinking as you look at this, well, education is one dimension on which you would want to sort of equalize or compare apples to apples, but there may be other things that are different about Black and white Americans that result in these unemployment rates. And I think one of the highlights of economics research over the last 20 years has been the introduction of what is referred to as an audit study. And an audit study basically takes a generic resume and sends it out to employers and changes in that resume only one thing, and that is the individual's name. And in 2003, some really smart economists at Harvard and University of Chicago did this audit study where they sent out these resumes and they changed the name on the resume to be either a very Black or a very white name, okay? And so by that, I mean, they looked at birth certificates in the state of Massachusetts and they drew names that repeatedly appeared on Black birth certificates as a Black name and on white birth certificates as a white name, okay? And you can see at the bottom of the slide, those names for whites were Emily Walsh and Greg Baker, and African-American sounding names were Lakeisha Washington and Jamal Jones. And so in this audit study, they mailed out these resumes and then they just decided to see what they got back. Okay, so these are made up individuals. Again, nothing is different between the resumes other than the name at the top. And what they found was that those white resumes received a callback for an interview at a rate of 1.5 times what those Black resumes did. Okay, so if you are wondering, is the labor market still discriminatory? Is this about employers discriminating, or is it about something else? This study, again, it's old, it's from 2003, but this study was the first one to sort of prove that employers are indeed discriminatory, okay? And this is, again, the evidence that would show you that. It's true for both men and women, and it's true in both cities that they surveyed, Chicago and Boston. They also saw that even lower quality white resumes, and so by lower quality, that just means less experience, or more time unaccounted for, more time unemployed, that those lower quality white resumes still got higher callbacks than Black resumes. I think a lot of the attention recently on these disparities has noted that it's not just income disparities that we are facing as a nation, but also wealth disparities. And so this slide from the Brookings Institution just shows you the evolution of median wealth for white Americans and Black Americans over the last roughly 3 decades. Okay, and I think this has gotten a lot of attention in the media. But the common statistic on this gap is that the net worth of white Americans is roughly 10 times the net worth of Black Americans. So there's an income disparity that's about 65% for Black Americans relative to white, but the wealth disparity is much, much greater. And in fact, on the order of 10 to 1. Okay, so I'm going to stop there in terms of just sharing data, and then our panelists have each been invited to give us kind of an opening statement of anything they want to share or some additional information about their perspective. And so I'm going to start with Clarence. Clarence, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And I want to say good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation, but also for this conversation. I want to definitely share it's encouraging that you're having this series of discussion about telling the truth and having a little deeper conversation when it comes to disparities that impact our overall community. My name is Clarence Vaughn, as it was mentioned, and I have the honor of serving as the director for the Office of Diversity and Community Relations at the Haslam College of Business. And one thing I really want to share, and hopefully definitely share throughout this conversation, is talking about not only what we see from a statistical standpoint, but what do we see as far as what seeds are being planted in communities, particularly marginalized communities of underserved populations. One thing that I do have the privilege and honor really to do every day is and really plant seeds into our future leaders. We work diligently with community leaders, those you see also on this panel with Mike Odom and also Terrence Carter and many others, to make sure that we start on the pre-collegiate side. So out in community outreach, having early conversations about entrepreneurship, also early conversations about personal and professional development. I truly believe it starts there, not only for our African-American communities, but all marginalized communities to have access to resources, but also education is key. Education may not be in the form of a college degree or a master's or a PhD, but education can be in the form of being aware of what opportunities are available to you as an individual as you aspire to do whatever it may be for your calling in life. So that's something I'm really passionate about when it comes to how do we make sure we change that gap. The gap is relevant. A lot of information that Marianne shared, of course, are facts, fact-based on what evidence is, but how do you change that? And we have to have small ripples to make those changes. And I believe the ripples is having these types of conversations, but also making sure that it's touching communities in need. So we definitely look forward to that conversation as we go through this discussion. And thank you again for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Clarence. Terrence, you're next.
Thank you, Marianne. Appreciate it. I'm Terrence Carter with the North Urban League. My introduction, I'm going to make a little bit more personal and then slide to the professional, but I'm a native-born Memphian, grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, single female head of household, 2 kids. I started working at the age of 12 in Memphis. I also started paying adult bills in Memphis. And when I say that, I mean helping with the light bill, any other household bills to basically support my single mom raising two bad children. I came to Knoxville in '83 to go to the University of Tennessee. My first career leaving the university was with the city of Knoxville. So my first 10 years of my career, I got to learn in detail the intricacies and the nuances of how local government worked. I also had the privilege and opportunity to work in almost every single inner city neighborhood in our city, including downtown. So I've worked on public infrastructure projects. I've worked on housing projects. I've worked on commercial development, economic development, and business development projects. My second job right after that was with KCDC. Was very instrumental in what went on in Mechanicsville when we tore down College Homes and rebuilt that neighborhood, or at least that section of Mechanicsville. Then I went off to get a master's degree, came back to Knoxville, ran a nonprofit for 7 years. So in sum total now, I've probably had about 33 years as a public servant in this city, working with community leaders and residents and trying to do whatever I can, I guess if you would say, to move the needle and make progress on some of these particular issues. I also get the opportunity to do that at the Urban League. So the perspective which I will respond to and make comments on are based on that lived experience, particularly when it comes to this particular topic. Having been in Knoxville for this many years, there's been progress, but then in some areas, particularly in the jobs and those kind of things, we see there's been little progress compared to what could be made. The other interest that I have in this particular conversation is at the Urban League, we're doing an anti-racism solution initiative. We started this conversation prior to COVID. We picked it back up during COVID at the end of last year. And our group of folk that started this journey with us came up with economic opportunity as the single highest area of concern that needs to be addressed. That includes some of the things that you mentioned earlier with regard to opportunities for folk in the labor market, but it also involves opportunities for people to do contracting with local government institutions and private sector institutions around this community. So we've been focused on that, and I will share some information that we've been working on. I am now more of a solutions discussion person. I care not as much about rehashing the problem, if you will. I think we know what the issues are, what the problems are. I think all of our conversations across this community need to be focused on solutions at this point. With that said, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to engaging you guys in the conversation.
Thank you, Terrence. I'm a Memphis baby myself, so we have that in common. Okay, Mike, floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Dr. Wanamaker. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate to be on a great panel with Clarence and TC. We work a lot together in our different entities and opportunities and organizations. So at the Knoxville Chamber, our mission is to drive regional economic prosperity. So in simpler terms, our reason for existence is to ensure that every single person within the Knoxville region is economically prosperous. They have the ability to buy a home, want to buy a home, ability to send their kids to college if they want to send their kids to college, ability to retire at an age in which they enjoy it if that's what they want to do. And so that is what we do every day. That is what drives us as we come to work and try to fulfill that mission. Now look, I'm from Louisiana, which means I may be dumb, but I ain't stupid. So we understand not every single person can be economically prosperous, but we'd much rather shoot for 100% miss versus shooting for 50% miss. And just by the fact that you're having these sessions right now shows that we're not where we need to be. And so we have, and Jim mentioned our new strategic vision, we have really turned our organization focus on these things every day to fulfill that mission. So we talk about things like infrastructure, which is public transportation and broadband access. We talk about talent, which is workforce development and public education, secondary education. We talk about entrepreneurship, which is access to capital and small business development, those kinds. And those are what we try to do. And we're trying to do it in a more focused on delivering meaningful, measurable results. And so that's what our team has really been put on over the last year and some change. And we look forward to continuing that conversation here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, and reminder to participants to throw your questions into the chat, and I'll either just read them directly or rephrase them and ask them. Okay, I actually want to start with looking back almost a year ago when the death of George Floyd really brought forward, I think, diversity and equity inclusion as a priority for businesses and organizations across the country, including at Ascension. I mean, what we're participating in right now, I think, would not have happened without those events being having unfortunately occurred. And so my first question for you, and I'll just throw it open, any of the three of you might respond, is do you think that it's mattered? Do you think that this renewed emphasis and renewed focus on diversifying workforces and equalizing opportunity within the business community, do you think that's actually going to take hold? Has all of this made a difference? And I recognize it's a pandemic, and so everything is upside down, and maybe it's hard to tell. But I'd love to know from your perspective how you think the last year has gone on that topic.
I was going to let TC go first, but I can definitely chime in, and hopefully, I don't know, TC can add more to the conversation. One thing I do want to touch on in the introduction, I have the honor to serve on the national board for civilian oversight of law enforcement. So situations like Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, George Floyd, and many others, I have opportunity to be a part on the investigative side, but also when you look at policy and legislation, it stretches past law enforcement. It touches, as you shared, Dr. Wanamaker, when it comes to economic structure, what's being changed as far as policies, what's being changed as far as the electoral process. So I definitely believe not only does it matter, but we are seeing changes. Is it enough change? Is there more conversation? I think what Terrence, Mr. Carter shared is really important. What are the solutions? So we're really working on the national, working with colleagues from all over the country and actually globally about solutions. It's unfortunate you have to have a sacrificial lamb in a sense to have that conversation. And it happened previously before when you look at others like Dr. King and many others that we can say we can be on here for about 5 hours sharing names, if not more time. But I believe it matters only when we have solutions. And solutions to me would be policies, procedures, hiring practices when it comes to making sure we have an equitable focus from our chambers, from our city government, our county governments, from our entities, to provide opportunities, but not only provide them, but have them where they are reoccurring and have some foundation to them, some stability. And stability to me, I believe it does start early on. And that's why I mentioned earlier when it comes to how do we invest into our future leaders, especially our young people who are, as you all know, unfortunately here in Knoxville, we've had issues with violence for many years. It's nothing new, but currently it's been heightened, particularly with around Austin East. But what are we doing to have solutions to make sure there's other outcomes for youth that have been disenfranchised for quite some time, you know? So I think for me, it definitely matters, but it only matters if we see change and really things that would be constitutional changes when it comes to our legislation, when it comes to opportunities available from the business economic side, entrepreneurial wise, but also when it comes to representation. Representation does matter in leadership positions. Do we see leaders being elevated so they can also be those who can open up doors for others and opportunities for others? So I'll stop there. I know that I'm sure Terrence can definitely add on more and more specifics, but that's my initial thought to your question.
My initial response to your question is the answer is yes. I think this is something that will be sustained from the standpoint of the biggest one is while we all watched George Floyd in that situation, and then we watched what happened around the country and globally. But since then, some of these things have repeated themselves even after that instance. So for that reason, I think part of the issue is continuing to have the conversations, grow the conversations. And then part of it is also coming up with some very actionable items that we can take in the short term, meaning right here and now. Some of it is focused on long-term things that need to be addressed. So when you think about this from a structural and a systemic race perspective, these issues are a direct reflection of what we've put down on paper as laws and legislations. And starting there from a long-term perspective to see what that language looks like and then addressing it from that standpoint on paper. But in terms of the right now, so if let's just take the economic ceiling, what I mean by that is so many professionals of color that come here, get educated, get trained. The first thing they do is leave this community. Part of the reason is they don't see people that look like them in leadership at the highest level of corporate Knoxville. I say corporate Knoxville. So one solution, for example, just to address that issue is what I call the 3-5-15 pledge. If 15% of the largest employers in this city committed to hiring diversity at every level of their company, and then start grooming people to take positions and have upward mobility career paths, that's going to address that part of that issue. I'm not saying it's solving that issue, but that's one example of what I am pushing, if you will, to corporate. And I'll have this conversation in more in depth with Mike, but I've already started having with some other employees. But people have to see the intentionality, the laser focus on changing that issue. And when we see it in real time, in real life, our young people will pay notice to it. They'll take notice to it, and then they will start believing that there are opportunities and reasons more than anything to stay in this community. I'll use my oldest daughter, who is now 30, but the week after she graduated college, she graduated on the first Friday in December. The next weekend, she was off to North Carolina. And that happens every day in our community.
And from perspective, Dr. Wanamaker, there's no doubt that the killing of George Floyd and the others that Clarence mentioned have had a huge impact on our community, our region, and our work. It used to be as we would do things, as we put initiatives together, and we'd say, okay, well, how does it impact this? And then somewhere down the line, someone would say, well, what is that doing to our African-American community, our Hispanic, Latino community? Now, those things are at the forefront. So as we start developing from our team or from our board or our stakeholders, that's the first question is, well, what is this going to do to help us move the economic prosperity of our African American community? And that's been a huge change. And so that has to change our mindset as we're developing these things. We've become, I think, probably something Dr. Wanamaker, music to your ears, we're much more data driven so that we can, we're not just trying to guess. And look, I'm a middle-aged, middle-class white guy. It's hard for me to understand, like what TC said, some of the things he grew up. I didn't grow up in that. I grew up in Oaks Peak, Louisiana. That wasn't an issue for us. And so we're having to have these conversations and understand, put ourselves in those perspectives, to understand those perspectives, so that we can develop with partners like the Urban League and others that potential solutions. Look, everything we do is not going to be right. We're going to fail. And as we tell our team, like, when you talk about NASCAR racing, if you ain't rubbing, you ain't racing. If we ain't failing, we ain't trying. And we're more willing to fail now if we're trying to do the right things in the right ways for the right reasons. And that wasn't happening before these situations occurred.
Good. I want to follow up on almost everything you said. One thing I want to ask about in particular is local entrepreneurship. So from an economist perspective, I think one of the most interesting things about the racial wealth gap is that economists have shown you can't close it if you don't encourage Black entrepreneurship, that a lot of wealth is generated in the white community by taking risks and by having an entrepreneurship experience that's very successful, and that the rate of Black entrepreneurship in this country is really low. And there's been a lot of discussion in Knoxville about this in the last several months. I know there's been and I don't know all the details, but I know there's a program out of Memphis that folks are emulating locally. I know there's someone mentioned this last week, but there's the Black Business Directory, which helps people find Black businesses in Knoxville to do business with. And so I wanted to open that topic of entrepreneurship up for discussion and kind of help us understand how important you think that is in the broader story here in Knoxville, and what changes or what policies might be in place to really boost Black entrepreneurs.
Well, I'll start with that first response in that. So, and these are statistics. If you look at the U.S. Census in terms of business ownership, and this is a little dated, but it definitely absolutely reflects what we are seeing. So when you think of all of the businesses in our community, 36,438 are white, 2,242 are Black. To your point, that is in fact an issue. And that's probably why also this has surfaced to the top of our list under the economic opportunity category with our anti-racism solutions group. Some of the things that people express concern, obviously, and I think Mike mentioned this earlier, access to capital. Where we are a bank, we are a CDFI, so we can make loans to businesses. Now, having said that, we still operate in a way that we don't want to lose money, so we can continue to revolve the money and make new loans. Part of those challenges is helping to structurally, from an operational standpoint, helping the minority-owned, in particular Black-owned businesses, put the right processes, procedures in place where they're not focused on running the business all the time. They're focused on working on the business to get the business better. So that initiative that you just mentioned in Memphis is called 800K, in Knoxville it's called 100K. So that is a good approach as well to help support Black-owned businesses. So in that initiative, 5 Black-owned businesses were selected. They've got 5 mentors each to work with them in terms of growing their revenues in their business. And there's a goal to do 10 million over a 10-year period to come up with 100 million in terms of increased revenue. So they're doing that. We decided that we would also make those winners, or those people in the first cohort, if you will, the business owners, make our next level, which is a more advanced 7-month business training program, to add on the value of what they're doing with regard to revenue growth. The next level, 7-month advanced training, is focused on helping their operations grow. So it is intentionally a growth plan that will be looked at over a course of 3 years to support those businesses. And the more we continue to grow those types of things, it will also help. Locally, I think our local government can also help. A lot of these business owners have indicated that the infrastructure is better and investment is made on local government's part, that will help with the situation. If they also included tax breaks like they do for developers that are doing projects downtown, if they do those same breaks for people that are operating and willing to go put their capital at risk in minority communities, that they also get those same tax incentives and tax breaks that the larger, more affluent companies are getting. So those are some of the things that are happening, but you will see just by that first number, there are a lack of Black businesses, and that is a potential source of job growth within the communities where the businesses are located versus having to try to figure out how to get to our industrial parks that are in West Knox County, East Knox County, Maryville, Arcola, et cetera. That's my response to that one. I hope it was addressed the question that you asked.
It did. Let me follow up with a question in the chat, which is there a micro lending program, an active micro lending program in Knoxville? I know I serve on the board of a different CDFI, and one of the issues there is that they make big loans. And so if you're not big, then you don't qualify. So, you know, where does someone get a small loan in Knoxville, and is there activity in that space?
It is very challenging for a business owner to get a micro loan. As you said, there are 3 CDFIs that operate actively in our community. We may be the only one that's willing to do micro lending, meaning it could be 5,000 and less if that's what it takes. Now, traditionally, our model works with 5,000 up to 250,000. So there's not a whole lot of opportunity for micro loans for these minority-owned businesses, which is why you see them using credit cards and then going to high-risk lenders like payday lenders to start getting money, but not realizing the interest rate that they're paying on that money is actually working against them when it comes to generating revenues and growing their companies because they're paying such high interest rates. So that's a thing we need to figure out how to solve. There needs to be more micro lenders besides the Urban League. But as you just mentioned, most of our CDFIs make larger loans because, you know, they got people that expect their return on their money.
Dr. Wanamaker, you mind if I add on to that a little bit?
Please.
So first of all, entrepreneurship across our region is an issue for us. You need to get more businesses started, so more businesses successful, so that more businesses become big businesses, so they hire more people, which is what we're trying to do. The path to prosperity is for someone to have a career that pays a good wage, salary with benefits and retirement, those kind of things. And we lack that. Now, like most things, not just here, but in most places, when we're lacking in something, that gets highlighted even more in our areas with inequality, like our African American community. So TC's point is exactly right. We have got to focus on this. The 100 initiative is a great start, but he also mentioned that access to capital is the key. And so, for instance, at the behest of Vice Mayor McKenzie, along with the city's community empowerment department, we have been having conversations talking about our strategic vision with Black ownership. And the number one thing that comes up is access to capital. So we were fortunate enough to secure a grant from the Truist Foundation. And so we have hired a consultant that's working with us to create an access to capital strategy for the region, which will be done in a couple months. The number one thing that we're seeing is what you out with that micro lending, is that's where the hole is. You get past friends and family, you get past your credit cards, but you're not big enough yet to go to the point where you need a CDFI, or you don't have the collateral pack to qualify for a bank loan. And so we've been looking at what other communities have done. So for instance, a community out of Florida, Gainesville, Florida, city actually put forth some money with a financial institution to back any microloans that couldn't get paid back. And it was a small amount, it was like $87. So those are the types of initiatives that we're looking at to try to address this, because to TC's point, that is our biggest concern now when it comes to Black entrepreneurship.
Good, thank you. Okay, I want to, we've been talking about employers. I want to flip the tables for a second and talk about workers. So Clarence, I want to start by asking you to talk about the BETS program at UT. And I'll let you explain the whole thing and share that with the audience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wanamaker. I believe it ties in well, and it really dovetails well to the conversation because you have to prepare the workforce and have a talented and really an advanced workforce to bring employers here. I want to touch real quickly. When I served as a banker with US Bank and also Wells Fargo, we will solicit, of course, opportunities to be on the ground when it comes to new employers coming to the East Tennessee area. And some of the main things we'll look at, of course, skill sets, educational background, what the GDP is, as far as overall capita for the area. And that has a lot to do with education. So one thing that we do, and I'm definitely really have the honor to do so, is serve as kind of like the guide, but also looking at ways that we can advance our pre-collegiate programs. The Office of Diversity and Community Relations has been with the Haslam College of Business since 2007. A lot of his legwork, you may know the name or may not, our Vice Chancellor, Tybee Small, and also our Dean, Steve Mangum, played a significant role in creating that office. So it wasn't by happenstance. It's something that's been consistent over many years. And we've touched a lot of lives when it comes to young people now being adults and being working professionals. And the way that we do that is through our pre-collegiate programs. We have 3 specific programs, 2 that really focus on rising juniors, and 1 that we would say like our marquee program that focuses on rising seniors. And what our goal is to build a pathway to success. And having that pipeline. So we start really early on working with Project Grad here in Knoxville with the early college awareness program. So we go into middle schools, elementary schools, working with Real Talk Mentoring with Assistant Principal Clarence Vaughn at Vaughn Middle School, having an early conversation to have students then come to the campus. Typically it's on campus, but this past summer and this upcoming summer, we'll be doing it virtually, where they have a free program. The 2 programs that we have for rising juniors are our AIM Academy and Web Institute. So AIM Academy is accounting information. We have a lot of assistants from college that really lead that conversation for us. But students are giving information about budgeting, workshops, personal and professional development, how to prepare yourself when it comes to transitioning from high school or even transitioning period into college or ever into trades. And then Women in Business Institute is really for young ladies who are rising juniors who have an interest in business. They have a series of discussions, a series of workshops, and also a lot of investment placed into their building and also learning more about business, learning more about entrepreneurship. And we work with the Anderson Center through the Haslam College with Dr. Tom Gray, who works heavily with us with the Women in Business Institute and many others that work with that program. And that leads into the BETS program. So the BETS program stands for Business Education for Talented Students. So the talented students come from all over the country. This past summer, we've had students from every part of our country, north, south, east, and west. And this is really more of our marquee program. Typically it's residential and we have them on campus, but they get to touch everything from the government side, from the community service side, from the business aspect. They're assigned roles. They have something we call marketplace, where they'll create their own entity. This past year, they were doing bikes and creating bikes. So you have a CFO, a CEO role, and learn how to be leaders and make leadership decisions. So I can definitely go on and on about the programs, but that's specifically what I believe that the initial investment is. It's a free program. Students that we've had from there now, our goal is that we have through the great gift from the Haslam Foundation that we're able to offer scholarships now for our BETS completers. So if you complete the summer program, you can get a scholarship to arrive at the Haslam College of Business, of course, if you enroll and accept it. So as I was saying earlier, the seed that's planted starts there. And we're really proud of those programs because it gives students a real experience, even those who may not even go to college. Our goal is for them to go to college, trade school or something, but they have an opportunity to engage, to meet community leaders, business leaders, and also professionals throughout the college and learn more about what it takes to take that next step.
Good, thank you. Bishop Cole, you're up.
Morning. I just wanted to say a quick word. In a previous life, I thought I was going to be an economist, and so I love this sort of conversation. Mike and Clarence and I were both members of Leadership Knoxville 2020, and I look forward, Terrence, to meeting you and learning more about how the diocese could support you in your work. Also, I have a Memphis connection. I still miss Goldsmiths. I grew up in the Boot Hill of Missouri. My brother lives there, and so I always love to make a Memphis connection.
I worked at Goldsmith every college break, every single year, especially around the holidays. I can wrap gifts better than most women.
So Santa Claus was at an enchanted forest, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's right. That's right. So one thing I want to say, I think, because there was one question about what could churches do. We have a ton of social capital. We have a ton of social capital. We have networks, we know people, and we leverage that all the time for folks. And so to think about how might we leverage that for the wider community of Knoxville, I think is a huge piece. This also relates to Tom's question about mentorship, the ways to invest in young people, to think about how we navigate that. I was in college, and someone finally said to me, you know, every steak does not have to be well done. So someone set me as, you know, I was a country kid from Missouri, had no idea, you know, I thought bush hogging was like hunting. I mean, I knew nothing about nothing. And people took me on and mentored me. And so mentorship, that's all young people need that. And so to think about how we open up those networks of social capital that we have. Also, as churches, so much of our money is connected to nonprofits. So in the diocese, we've started investing in Seed in East Knoxville. We've started investing in East Tennessee Freedom Schools. So to know that when we want to do outreach, and for me, it's not so much outreach as it is, how do we reduce suffering? If you ask the question of how do we reduce suffering, because sometimes when we talk about outreach, we'll say, well, that made me feel good. Well, that's great, but did it reduce suffering? So to think about investments in like Freedom Schools, into Seed, and Seed is SEEED. Stan Johnson also was a classmate of ours at Leadership Knoxville. Also to know that as it relates to George Floyd, there's a great James Baldwin quote about white people can choose to see or not to see, and Black people don't have that choice. So I think right now, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor have given us another opportunity to see. And to me, it's just like if you're in recovery, you have to work that program every day. And I think as white people, we are in recovery as it comes to racism. And we have to work it every day of how do we keep seeing what's in front of us. Mike and Terrence and Clarence can't use this language, but I can. We're also dealing with sin. We're dealing with personal sin and communal sin. And so to realize we are people that believe in grace, but also with grace comes amendment of life. And so it's that ongoing work of doing that. And there's a book, and I don't know if Terrence or Mike or Clarence have seen this yet, a book that I've just heard about called The Sum of Us, about how racism costs all of us. So in some ways, if nothing else, if we want a healthier economy, Heather McGee, who's the author, a young woman of color, suggests racism also is just bad for the economy. So if you can't be motivated by virtue or higher power, if you could be motivated by green, then to realize that a more diverse economy is good for business. And again, I think that's whatever gets us to the table, we get there, right? So again, thank you all for being a part of this morning. And Ascension, thank you for having this panel.
May I give you a response to your very direct question?
Yes, sir.
Churches can help by identifying minority entrepreneurs within your congregations, supporting those entrepreneurs, whether by doing business with them or helping them get started. Now I'll transition to something I heard Mike say with regarding to starting new businesses. That absolutely is critical. We started doing entrepreneurship training for people who had concepts, ideas that wanted to try to get them launched. So we started trying to work on that issue in September 2014. In fact, we just had our third week of our spring cohort this past Saturday. So the whole purpose of that is to help people successfully start and grow businesses. So co-starters is 10 weeks for startups. Next level is for existing businesses that are in the growth phase or want to grow. So more of those things absolutely are critical. And to Clarence's point, in terms of starting the idea of entrepreneurship education within our K through 12 schools is critical. Our school system, from my vantage point, it is doing two things: developing talent for either going to get a job or going to go to college. Entrepreneurship is nowhere in the educational curriculum at any level on a large scale. So starting them early, kids learn, and even if they don't open up a business, it will still even help them in college if they have that knowledge and that expertise before they get to college. So those are my three remarks that are directly to what the churches can do and why it's important. And also when you think about an inclusive economy, we've been doing and have the privilege of having a lot of research from a lot of folk that are helping us. But at the end of the day, race and gender should not be a barrier to owning a business. Removing these barriers to ensure people of color and women can start and grow successfully is critical to an inclusive growth in our community. And think about job growth being directly tied to business growth. In some of the communities we serve, there is negative job growth, which means basically a lot of these communities are losing businesses versus growing businesses. So when you think about it, and to your last point, Bishop, it's good for our whole community and our whole local economy to help support these businesses.
Also, if I can
Dr. Wanamaker, if I may, just make a quick comment. I'm so thankful that you posted in the chat about the Black Business Directory. I believe that churches also can patronize Black, Latinx, many other businesses, not just for Black people or Hispanic people to patronize these businesses, for everyone. They have goods and services that provide resources for all of us, whether it's construction or materials that you need for your home. I would just say patronize would be another way that we can also have churches and the community involved as well.
Yeah,
One point.
If I can just quickly say, I've discovered Mark Nelson, and that's, if you wonder, like, how does the bishop look so good? It's because I buy all my clothes at Mark Nelson Denim. And again, to know that where we put our dollars matter, right? And to me, it is one step. It is one thing. We need many other things going on, but where we put dollars really matter.
Here's one idea, and I had a chance to listen to Heather McGee a year before the pandemic and the George Floyd and that kind of stuff, and she's remarkable, gifted and talented, and she knows the numbers and she knows the impact of how race intersects with a lot of different issues. But if you could offset the cost of having her in our community, that's something you can do directly and in very short term. So like the month of April, if you could get Heather McGee fees paid to get her here so she can talk about this issue from a nationwide perspective and how these things work together, that'd be great. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but in a way I do.
Oh, it's called an altar call, Terrence, and it's all right. So we'll start working on that.
Great.
All right, team, I got about 6 questions in the chat and 9 minutes. So this is going to be the rapid fire section. But first thing, I'm going to start at the bottom, kind of work up. One question in the chat is, this is a congregation of a lot of professionals. And I can bet that many people on this call right now would be thrilled to be a mentor to in a pre-collegiate program or in a collegiate program. Those of us who are interested in that, what would you tell us to do? And I'll direct that at Clarence.
But first, contact me. I'll put my contact information here in the chat. We definitely have peer mentors from the standpoint, but also those who want to lead a discussion, talk about your profession or just your work life. Please be sure to reach out. So I would just simply say, reach out to me. We have opportunities where you can invest in our young people. We have mentorship programs as well. It doesn't have to be necessarily college students, but we want community members involved as well. So I'll put my contact information. Just simply reach out to me and we can schedule opportunity for you to be involved for those who are interested.
Okay.
And here's how they can help in the space of young entrepreneurs. One of the biggest things we've seen, and we did surveys and it tested this out, back office operational support is what most small businesses lack. They need help setting up their bookkeeping and accounting system, somebody they can always count on to help them with those types of issues, taxes and that kind of thing. Then marketing and sales are the 4 top things that if anybody has expertise in those, our smaller startup entrepreneurs and early stage business owners, they could use that support so they could focus on the business and generating revenues and having a system or a back office support structure that will help them so they can actually focus on the business and then do what's necessary to work on the business to be successful.
Okay, good. We have a question in the chat about HBCUs, and I will admit that one of my pandemic activities has been listening to podcasts, which is not something I normally do. And I was surprised the other day to learn that Michael Eric Dyson, who's a pretty famous theorist or maybe commentator on race in America at Vanderbilt, went to Knoxville College. He's not from Tennessee, but his family put him on a Greyhound bus to Knoxville years ago, and he went to school here. How does the demise of Knoxville College and other HBCUs like that, how is that affecting economic prosperity here and across the country?
It's affecting it drastically. I'll jump in real quickly. Drastically, I'm a graduate, proud graduate of Florida A&M University, which is a HBCU in the state of Florida, in the capital city of Tallahassee. And typically, what happens, and I keep it really simple. You look at the tags and also those who are representatives of those people who graduate, working professionals, whether it's from going to be in elected office, going to be teachers, business owners, that are automatically inject that into the local environment and local community. Once you remove that, that removes that from the community, because you have college educated professionals that are able to invest and be involved and plug into the community. And also when you look at the future as far as aspirations for young people and what the HBCU brings, it brings an experience. I'm not speaking against any of the PWI schools, but for me, the experience was a life lesson, a life lesson to see what African-American males in a different light. For those who don't have that experience, African-American females in a different light, when you remove that, that takes away really a lot of the leaders from the community, because you have ways to plug into the HBCU, whether it's from a fraternal or sorority standpoint, or even from a standpoint of education that's brought. So I definitely believe that that's taking away a lot that can be injected into the community from an economic standpoint, but also from a social standpoint as well.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly, absolutely. And when I came to Knoxville College was thriving and well. The student population and the University of Tennessee population worked well, communicated, engaged. But Knoxville College has such a historical legacy in this community. Most of our older, mature African Americans in this community, almost all of them graduated from Knoxville College. And then they stayed in this community and they became educators, doctors, lawyers. So the professionalism and the jobs that they took ran the spectrum for any kind of profession you can think of. What we see now is a lost treasure, and every day, every building is crumbling down with nobody investing. And don't get me wrong, they have some issues that structurally, internally need to be addressed. And I would make it almost like the same type of support that an entrepreneur needs, that HBCU in particular need that same type of investment. Not just in terms of the operations of the college, but into the physical infrastructure of the college. That should not be a college campus that looks like that today, especially when we have rebuilt an entire community around that college and in that area.
Another question in the chat is about there's been a lot of focus on the role of employers in the community and government. And what can you say about the role of, I think as the commenter asks, about an individual's own sort of drive, determination, and effort. And the question is, as we've focused on the kind of employer and government side, have we neglected this more individual, effort side of the equation? I'll just leave it there.
Well, I think Mike might have more access to the employers in the community, but from an individual effort, I'm assuming, and I don't want to make assumptions, so tell me if I'm inaccurate in this assumption, the individual, like a minority person like me or Clarence on the call, the effort that we put into getting to that professional level and growing our career, is that kind of
I think that's the spirit of the question.
Okay, so I think the spirit of the question then, and my response would be, there are absolutely brilliant, talented, skilled Knoxvillians that do everything they need to get their education, to try to start and grow their career. The reality is they don't see a career here. So the effort is being put in, the effort is not being rewarded by opportunities in the communities where these people of color grow up and live in. So almost all of them with the brightest opportunities, they are not here because they left here, because they are looking at the totality of this city. They are looking at who's doing what, who's not doing what. And what they see is, this is not a welcome environment for me. When I get the job, I'm not welcome and I'm not treated like I'm a part of the culture. So part of that has to be the cultural change within these employers' companies to make the people feel welcome. Diversity and inclusion, I heard a lady from, I want to say from Pennsylvania come down and say this. It's one thing to invite me to the dance and the party, but if I'm stuck over here in the corner and nobody's engaging with me, I'm still lonely and isolated and I don't feel supported and structured. So why am I going to stay here when I can go somewhere else? And I see a whole lot of people looking like me thriving well. I don't mean to take up all the talk. Mike, you go ahead.
Mike, I'm going to direct a question at you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
If you want to comment on
absolutely.
this one, go for it.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead. Put the next question. I know we're running out of time.
Our last week we had a conversation about K through 12 education. And one of the points that was brought up in that conversation was that the property tax here in Knox County hasn't budged in some 20 some odd, 30 some odd years. Okay, just an insane amount of time. And so it seems like an obvious solution. If you want better schools, you better, you're gonna have to increase that property tax. The question in the chat this morning is, does increasing the property tax ultimately have a disproportionate effect on Black Knoxvillians? And should we be thinking about different solutions, kind of financing solutions that might not have as much of an impact? So I'm going to direct that at you, but then Terrence and Clarence, feel free to chime in.
And it's a great question. And because, coming from Texas, where you value, and it's not so much the tax rate, it's the valuations. Because in Texas, it's so popular to move there, the valuations are almost doubling, grow 50 to 60% every year. So your property taxes by extension go up every year as well. So to come here where you have a property tax increase in 20 something years and the valuation stay fairly steady, has been a little bit of a shock to the system. And the answer though is probably you have to be careful, because you can't just raise it for one group of the people, because even if you're not a homeowner, you're going to pay for that property tax in your rent. The owner is not going to sit there and just say, hey, I'm going to eat this now. They're going to pass it over to the renter, which is going to have to pay more. So there has to be a little bit of a kind of moving the levels. Now, Louisiana, for instance, homestead exemption is the highest in the country. So, the property tax is almost, it's nothing. And it goes from a sales tax perspective. So I would say, though, we've got to be very careful in how that, look, I'm not afraid. We've said this before. Businesses want consistent, and so if we raise property taxes and do so in a very intelligent way, you're not going to see this big push of people against it from the business community. I want to say that, but you might not necessarily see the way that the system works, that you're automatically going to have that advantage in the school systems because of the way the state funding system works. So that was a very terrible answer to a very straightforward question, and I apologize.
No, that was a good answer. That makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about the capitalization into rental prices, which would of course be very regressive, I guess, in some sense. Okay, Christopher Hogan, do you want to unmute and ask your question? I don't know enough to even ask it. If Gigi will let you.
Yeah, so many years ago, the government issued what was called a individual development account. And I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but they partner with people who are working with jobs, and they parcel out a portion of their wages and put them in an account. The government matches those, and then you can use that for either educational purposes or to put a down payment on a home. I think it's run through Social Security office. Is that utilized now, or I'm just curious about it's individual development accounts.
Underutilized, and most people have no idea that it exists. KCDC used to do IDA accounts for people who are trying to move out of public housing and purchase their home. So they would match whatever the individual would put in there. And when they had enough to do a down payment, then that was the time when they would actually go buy a home. But the Social Security Administration doing it, I promise you, nobody in the Black community or any community of color is aware that even exists.
I'll put a link on that. So
I've never even heard of that. So I agree with TC. If, not that I know everything by any chance, but I've never even heard of it. So it's something to look into.
Okay, I'm gonna take the liberty to ask one more question and then we'll close. We really will close. All right, so there's been a lot of excitement in the last few weeks about economic development in Knoxville, about retaining an Amazon or recruiting an Amazon distribution center and some other kind of good news. Can you, can one or all of you talk about what possibilities there are in these big wins in economic development for underserved and underutilized communities in Knoxville, including the Black community?
I'll jump in first just by making a quick comment. One thing I've already seen, not for aspirational. Even with Amazon investing in research, I'm sure you may be familiar with this too, Dr. Wanamaker, when it comes to the Haslam College, investing in opportunities for jobs, of course. One big thing that we do through our office is really looking at 4 areas: recruitment, retention, education, and placement. And under placement, internship opportunities and career development. That opens up doors, opportunities for our students to stay here, because we have a lot of talent, 5 to 10 miles from all of us at the university, as TC said earlier, that leave, but how do we retain that talent? And also those who are here locally to invest in that talent. So I think that would be my initial thought when it comes to how that would be a very big impact.
Good.
Well, and I'll say from my perspective, Amazon picking the location that they pick is a positive thing, particularly for people who need jobs, and that is on the bus line, so people who don't have adequate or reliable transportation can get there. The unfortunate part is there's a slow ramp up to the majority of the jobs that are coming. And then the other thing is there's no commitment to do what I described earlier in terms of hiring diversity in your leadership roles, not just at the lowest position that you got in there, and committing to growing your talent. If you get them, to keep them, the only way you're going to retain them is to keep them progressing in their career. Now, Amazon represents one big deal with jobs coming here. The other announcements that we've heard recently, those are in the business industrial parks that people can't get to, and they don't have reliable access to transportation to get there. Not that somebody's not working on it. There's a group that's working on workforce transportation in the chamber that we are part of those discussions. So everybody's aware of that, trying to figure out how to solve that in an efficient, cost-effective way is the challenge, of course. But I think this might be the one time that I think something will hold and actually something will be presented and maybe work to address that issue. But most of the higher paying jobs are in these areas outside where people can't get to, and particularly people of color.
Yeah, so I can give you about 2 hours on this topic, but I will not, so we'll let you all go. So one, in the last 10 years, our 25 to 54-year-old age group, which is the key for economic growth, which is those who buy homes, those who fill jobs, those who start companies, those who have kids, we have grown by less than 0.5% in a decade. In that key, and we the tier 1 research university and the state's flagship university here. So to all the points that Clarence and TC made, we're educating people, and they're leaving to go somewhere else. We are the farm team for every other community around us. 2, when we talk about economic mobility, especially when it comes to workforce, because it is the #1 issue of the business community right now, is finding people and keeping people, ensuring that they have the skills that they need to have. Reliable transportation. So we have at least 3 expansions going on at Forks of the River Industrial Park, which is in Knox County, not in the city. We have no public transportation access to it. The other piece of this is childcare. So we have to have childcare to be able to do it. So all of these expansions are great, and look, this is what we do. So I'm extremely proud of our team. But if we can't ensure that the people who need these jobs, the people who are going to be able to fill those jobs, don't have the ability to get there, don't have the supports that they need there, don't have the skills that they need to get those jobs, it's all for naught. And so that's where the vast majority of our focus is right now, is to ensure we can address those things in a meaningful way, so that these people can take advantage of these jobs and they can have that economic prosperity that we're striving for.
And let me add on, if you don't mind, Mike, one more point to the point you're making now. The thing about the jobs, also, the compensation and pay for the jobs matter. As we continue to see poor people, if you will, especially poor people of color, having to work 2 and 3 jobs, that's ridiculous. They need a job that will cover their household living expenses, and then they don't have to do that 2 and 3 jobs because it's taken away from the time they can spend with their kids, growing them, nurturing them, giving them an example of what this looks like and what they can do and what they can be. But if they're making minimum wage and you do the math, there's 2,080 work hours in a year. You do that by minimum wage and you will see what people are having to live on and why they're having to do 2 and 3 jobs. And that, at some point, it's not popular everywhere, but that is not a sustainable model.
That Amazon $15 an hour, if you can get there, right? It resolves that. Okay, good. Thank you, panelists, so much. Let me just, we're going to close with prayer, and our prayer, I think, his alarm clock didn't go off this morning, so I think I'm closing us in prayer. So bear with me as let me try to share my screen here real quick. And okay, let us pray. We believe God created all people equal in worth and dignity, that differences of gender, culture, race, religion, abilities, sexual identities, and gifts are gifts of God for the people of God. We believe that the nature of God is multidimensional and that we are made in God's image. We believe that the miracle of God's creation is manifested through our many differences. We believe that to embrace diversity, we must empty a place within ourselves so there is room for others. We believe that our transformation rests in openness to the gifts and perspectives of others. We believe that to embrace diversity requires an explicit commitment to become a new kind of community. We believe God's love is perfected in our collective communal experiences as diverse people. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, with that, panelists, you're free to go. Thank you again for being here. We're really so thankful for you. Good luck to you. Thank you for leading us.